Hey, what's up? This is guitar lesson number 1. So, in these little lessons, the emphasis is going to be on getting you up and playing something that is recognizable as music as quickly as possible. So the emphasis is really going to be on like chords, basic chords, what are referred to as open chords, which is to say chords that use all 6 strings and are generally fretted like pretty close to the head. It gets more complicated after that point, but the open chords are generally where we want to start. I'm not going to be giving you a ton of like music theory type stuff, but I will be throwing in like a little bit of it here and there, because when you understand some of the very basic music theory stuff, it allows you to kind of extrapolate from your bass line. It's B-A-S-E line. I'm not talking about playing the bass, but yeah, once you learn sort of some part of the method behind the mechanics, then it allows you to take more steps independently. But the first thing is to break down. Well, you got to start somewhere, and the chord that most guitarists start with is the A chord. More specifically, that's A major, but generally, if someone refers to just the letter without any, any sort of like signifier or adjective after that, then they are talking about a major chord. So like if someone says, this one's in the key of A, that's the key of A major, or this is in the key of G, that's G major. So before we get to actually fretting the A chord itself, let's just quickly go through the individual strings, each of the 6 strings. The lowest string is E. You might want to take some notes on this. E. Second lowest is A. Third is D. Fourth, G. Next one is B. And the high string is another E. So the way that you fret an A chord is you want to press down on the 2nd fret of the D string, the G string, and the B string. And then you strum all 6 strings. So the question you might be asking is like, okay, how the heck do you actually like fret those notes? How do you hold down those strings? Well, most basic way to do it, and the way that a lot of people do when they're starting out, is to just use 1 finger per string. So like index finger on the D string, middle finger on the G string. That's a funny phrase, isn't it? And then ring finger on the B string. As you progress, you may find that feels like your hand's a little bit jammed up, your fingers might be too close together. I generally strum an A chord just using, I fret it just using first 2 fingers. And between those 2, just kind of mash them up, and I'm able to hold down all 3 of those strings in question. But that may not be the most intuitive or the most comfortable way to fret those strings right at the beginning. However, one thing I want to say, there is not really a right or a wrong way to like to fret these chords. That is to say, you do with your hands and your fingers what feels comfortable to you. In our, like, this is one thing that I often mention when I'm trying to show somebody how to play some basic guitar chords. There's like nothing in like our hunter-gatherer like ancestral experience that's at all compatible with the things that we're doing with our hands when we play guitar. Like, it's totally weird. It's not like, these are not, like, our bodies just don't normally or naturally work this way. And it takes almost everybody a little bit, you know, some amount of practice and drilling to simply be comfortable doing these weird things with our hands. So if it's more comfortable to you in the end to play an A chord holding down one string per finger, then cool. If it's more comfortable to you for you to hold down those 3 strings with 2 fingers, that's cool. If it's more comfortable for you to do it with 1 finger, also valid. As you play, you'll figure out what's comfortable to you. And if anyone tells you that you're doing it wrong, as long as you're playing the right notes, you're not wrong. And it's just, to say that there's like a right or wrong way to hold your hands when you play a guitar is just elitist. So there you go. Your first guitar chord and most people's first guitar chord, A. Now, that's cool. You might want to just sort of practice strumming that in any way you can. Just kind of hold your fingers there, get used to that sensation, get your muscles acclimated to gripping that guitar. What are you doing with your thumb? Well, you could just be resting it behind the neck. Or you could, and this is one way to do it, you can use your thumb for like added leverage to kind of like pinch the neck between your thumb and your fretting fingers. That might be a more advanced move. Honestly, that's something that I hardly ever do. I started playing just trying to get as quickly as possible from beginning to the actual, like, to the point where I was able to play any kind of song at all. And kind of glossed over what the heck I was supposed to do with my thumb. Now I hardly ever know what to do with my thumb. I do things with it that other guitarists tell me are wrong. They're wrong. They're elitist. Anyway. Do with your thumb at this point whatever is comfortable to you. So, yeah, that's the A. But that's just one chord hanging around in the ether, divorced from any kind of context. You need to contextualize. So that is why the second chord most people learn is E major. In a minute, I'll explain why this is a really good second chord in a practical sense. But for now, let's just get into why it's not complicated on like a purely mechanical sense. What you're doing with your hands is not terribly different from what you're doing with an A chord. To play an E, you want to hold down the 2nd fret of the A string, 2nd fret of the D string, 1st fret of the G string, and then you leave the other strings open. Strum all 6. And again, how you finger those three notes that you are holding down. How you do it is just whatever is more comfortable to you. For a lot of people, what is comfortable at the beginning is to hold down your A string, second fret of the A string, with your middle finger, second fret of the D string with your ring finger, and first fret of the G string with your index finger. That works well because it's like almost like you're making like 30% of a fist around the neck of the guitar. And it's also, you'll find with a little bit of practice, fretting it like that. That's a pretty easy way to transition from like an A chord to an E, or from anything to an E. Your fingers will just kind of fall into a place that's more intuitive than some other places it might fall. And again, like, as you play, as you continue, you may develop some of your own shortcuts. One of mine with an E chord is that I also fret an E with only two fingers. I hold down the A string and the D string with my middle finger, and the G with my index finger. That works for me because my fingers are large enough, and also because I just got to a point where I was so comfortable using three fingers that I was like, let's take one of them out of the equation. But at the beginning, you might want to do it with middle ring and index fingers. But I don't know. Whatever feels right to you is where you should go with it. So we have, at this point, two chords. The A and the E. So one thing that you should do now, pause this recording and just get accustomed to switching your fingers from one chord to the other and coordinating your fretting and your strumming. These are two things that don't necessarily come intuitively, but it's like riding a bicycle or doing anything that involves multiple limbs, sort of working quasi-independently of each other. It takes some getting used to, and then once you're used to it, then I don't know. Once you're used to it, then you're just ready to move on to something else. Now, I want to get into. Well, I'm going to show you one more chord that I don't necessarily expect you to pick up right away. But the reason that I'm showing you this chord is because we want to get you to a point where you're playing real songs. And I'm going to show you something that is a chord pattern that is at the root of a massive, massive amount of recorded music. And that pattern is something that we call 1-4-5. 1-4-5 refers to the first step of a scale, the fourth step of a scale, and the fifth step of a scale. So, we're already working in the key of A here, right? So, here's an A scale. You don't necessarily need to learn this because shredding scales is not like where we need to go right now. But for the sake of reference, so you know how to contextualize this stuff, an A scale, an A major scale, is like this. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, those are just the scale steps. Those aren't like the actual notes. It's actually A, in the key of A, it's actually A, B, C sharp, D, but like who cares about that? That's not important. 1, 4, 5 is about more than any one musical key. It's applicable across like, you know, every key. So to sort of recap, in the key of A, 1, 4, 5 would be A, D, and E. That's A. The fourth step of the A major scale is a D. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's your 4. And the fifth step of the A major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's E. So this is going to be pretty recognizable, I think, because 1, 4, 5 is like, that's like a huge amount of American folk music, country music, it's gospel, it's Chuck Berry, it's, you know, it's Buddy Holly, it's the Ramones, it's the blues, you know? So you can see how, like, we're putting things in context here. The A, like, if I'm showing you an A and an E, they cannot exist in a vacuum. I will now explain what I'm doing, how I'm playing that D chord. This is a little bit more complicated, and you seriously, I'll revisit this at some point in the future. You might want to back burner actually learning the D, and just keep it as in the back of your mind as something that you are going to tackle, you know, at some point. But I'll show it to you right now. If it feels totally weird, then don't worry about it just yet. We'll have other things to talk about and to learn while your fingers just get more acclimated to playing this instrument. So let's work from the highest note down to the lowest, in this case with the D. You want to hold down the 2nd fret of the high E, the 3rd fret of the B, the 2nd fret of the G. Oh, man, what did I just do? I totally goofed right there. Wasn't looking at the guitar itself. 2nd fret of the high E string. 3rd fret of the B string. 2nd fret of the D string. I'm sorry, for one more time. 2nd fret of the high E string. 3rd fret of the B string. 2nd fret of the G string. Leave the D string and the A open. Let them ring out. So yeah, that whole cluster, that thing you're doing with those three fingers, that usually takes people a little bit of time to get accustomed to, but you will. Some people even hold down the high E string, the B string, and the G string, all with like an index finger, and then they just throw in the middle finger on the 3rd fret of the B to complete that little pattern. That is definitely a move that would require some skill, some practice. But yeah, that's a D. One of the other complicated things about a D chord is what the heck you should do with the low E string. Because I'm gonna just fret that, what I showed you, the E string 2nd fret, B string 3rd fret, G string 2nd fret. Let's see what happens when you strum all 6 strings and you let the low E ring out. It sounds totally weird, and it sounds kind of wrong. Because that low E is not a step in, it's not part of the D major chord. It's not one of the notes that makes up that chord. So it sounds totally discordant. And there are a number of ways to get around having that big, stupid low note getting in your way and making your D sound like garbage. One way to do it is to simply not strum it at all. A lot of people do that. A lot of people just leave it. And leaving it out is something that may feel more comfortable to you over time. Because, a lot of guitarists are, frankly, a little bit sloppy. And once they get comfortable playing guitar, their strum gets a little sloppy. It is not uncommon to have a sloppy strum. Once you're more accustomed to playing, you're probably going to start using more fluid motions with your hands and wrists. So if I'm playing any kind of chord pattern, if I'm playing. What I did right there, I did not hit all 6 strings every time I strum the chord. It's just you get most of them, you get the general idea. And to the listener, it sounds fine. So, yeah, one way to deal with that low E string when you're playing a D chord is to just not touch it. Another method is to rest your thumb lightly on top of that string. So right on top of the neck, your thumb is just kind of flopped over, and it's touching that low E string, but it's not really doing anything to it. It's not holding down the string. So what that does is it just deadens the string. So when you go for a full 6-string strum on the D chord, you don't hear the low E because you're deadening it. And another way of doing it, this is the way that I do it, and this is unconventional. One of the reasons that I do this is because I never had real guitar lessons, and I was just going by ear, right? So what I do with that low E string is I just wrap my thumb around the neck, and I fret that low, I fret the 2nd fret of the low E string with my thumb. I'm just grabbing because I didn't have guitar lessons at the beginning, I never took guitar lessons. a lot of what I was doing when I first started learning was basically just grabbing the neck of the guitar like a baseball bat. And it's a totally valid way of doing it. It works. It gets you to where you need to be. It's a bit inelegant, but it's one way. We'll get into other ways. I'm getting a little bit beyond where we need to be. But regardless, yeah, that's like kind of a deeper dive into a D chord and what to, how to make it work sort of in the context of this 1-4-5 pattern. And I said 1-4-5 carries out, like it works in every key, because every note has a corresponding 8-note scale. So 1-4-5 in the key of A is A, D, E. In the key of C, it's like C, F, G. In the key of G, it's G, C, D. So, yeah, that's it. That's just like a little bit of. I wanted to get into the 1-4-5 thing, because if you're ever playing with other people, it's just like, it's a good bit of musical shorthand. Everyone's gonna know what you're talking about, and also like, I think that that understanding like these basic chord patterns and how they play out in like, across key, in like basically every imaginable key, helps make this instrument feel less mysterious. There, we may be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but to get yourself playing and to get yourself, learning on your own beyond what information I'm giving you, it's super helpful to know what kind of method or theory is behind the mechanical parts of what you're doing. So, yeah. I suppose in this lesson, what we have covered is primarily the A chord and the E chord, and those are the things that you should work on practicing now. And we've also explained what those two chords are pointing to. Something that's like recognizable as a song, and a lot of songs at that. If you want to practice the D chord as well, you can totally do that. But otherwise, we'll have other chords to think about, and other little sort of musical tricks and other bits of like light musical theory. Yeah, that's it for the first lesson. Next time, I want to get into like what the actual like building blocks of a major chord is, and also a minor chord. We're going to get into minor chords a little bit too, which are super important and help. I'm going to stop talking now, but yeah, go practice. Do whatever.